Hey guys, tonight, we're stepping into the cold, real cold. The kind that sinks through your boots, stiffens your eyelashes, and bites your fingers even inside wool mittens. You'll feel it in your bones before you even reach the front door. It's the middle of winter. Not the cozy, fuzzy socks and hot chocolate kind. No, this is history's winter, the brutal, unforgiving sort that doesn't care how tired you are or how much soup you had. The air is so dry and cold that even wood cracks in protest. Your breath fogs up in front of you. And if you think you're going to survive without 10 layers of whatever was lying around, well, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always fun seeing where we all are in the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're trudging through snow that's packed and squeaky beneath your feet. Every step kicks up powder and regret. There's no sound except your boots, the wind, and the occasional creak of ice shifting somewhere beneath. And all you're trying to do is not die on the way back to your barely insulated one-room house that smells faintly of onions and desperation. Winter before the conveniences of radiators and space heaters was not a season, it was a siege. You had to prepare for it. Stockpile food, fix the leaks, double-check your chimney so you didn't smoke yourself out, or worse, let in a draft. You're living in a world where the walls are made of wattle and daub or unsealed wood, and the roof, probably thatched. Charming, yes. Warm, not so much. It's morning, and instead of sunlight, there's just gray haze pressing against the small glass pane or oiled parchment if you're in the wrong century. The inside of your home is barely warmer than outside. Your breath turns visible inside. And on the wall, frost flowers, beautiful spirals of ice forming delicate little art pieces on surfaces they absolutely should not be forming on. You didn't leave the window open. It's just that cold. And here's the kicker. If you're poor, which historically you probably are, you don't even have glass, just a wooden shutter. So you close it to keep out the wind, but now you're in total darkness. Welcome to winter pick one, frozen or blind. The bed is no haven either. It's stuffed with straw. Lumpy, pokey, and by now a bit moldy. You've got a couple of woolen blankets that weigh more than a modern suitcase and maybe a fur if you're lucky, or if your family didn't eat it during the last famine. You didn't sleep alone. No one did. It wasn't romantic. It was survival. Your siblings, your cousins, maybe even a goat. If it produced body heat, it was invited. And there's always that one toe that just won't warm up. You know the one. Historians still argue whether people genuinely acclimated to this kind of cold, or if they just suffered through it. Maybe it was a bit of both. Evidence from burial sites shows that arthritis and respiratory illnesses were widespread. Not surprising. Breathing ice crystal air while kneeling by a fire that produces more smoke than heat. That'll do it. You look around your cabin, and everything is hard and still. The table is cold to the touch. The clay mug you left out has frozen solid. There's frost creeping inside your water bucket. You haven't tasted fresh vegetables in weeks. Just roots. On a good day, a pickled egg. On a bad day, boiled leather. No really people used to boil leather for broth. And if it came from a shoe, even better since it had meaty bits. There's a cat curled up in the rafters. It's not yours. It's just warm up there. You can't blame it. You stir from your not-quite rest and steel yourself for the day. The sun's up, but you wouldn't know it. The air smells like damp ash and unwashed wool. You pull on yesterday's clothes because they're the only clothes. They're stiff, almost crunchy. And let's not talk about the socks. A quirky tidbit for you in medieval Russia, people would keep hot stones in their sleeves or even up their tunics just to hold off the cold. Temporary relief, sure, until the stone dropped and burned a hole through your one good shirt. You step outside and immediately regret it. Your nose hairs freeze. You slip on the steps and catch yourself on the frost-covered railing, another near-death moment. That makes 3 this week, and it's only Tuesday. Winter back then wasn't about finding joy in the quiet. It was about enduring, holding on, waiting for the world to thaw just enough to let you think clearly again. Until then, you keep moving, because if you stop, you might not start again. You wake up, and the first thing you notice is that your nose is cold inside. That's not a metaphor. The tips of your nostrils sting a little from frost, and when you sit up, you see your own breath misting into the air. Not from some broken heater or cracked window, but because winter has come inside the house again. The walls are damp with condensation that has long since turned to ice. Your ceiling drips a little when the sun briefly warms the rafters. And the window, if you're lucky enough to have one, it's a milky, frozen mess. Most folks in the village didn't even bother trying to keep the frost off the panes. It was just a fact of life. You'd scrape it off with a bit of wood or just write your name in it and pretend it's festive. Under the heavy woolen blanket, still scratchy and still smelling vaguely of lanolin, you're sharing body heat with at least 2 other people. Maybe a sibling, maybe your cousin visiting for the season. If you're very unlucky, a snoring uncle who insists on sleeping with his feet in your space. Personal space doesn't exist. In winter, it's body heat or bust. The straw mattress is damp in the corners. It shouldn't be, but it always is. You shift slightly, hear the crunch of frost beneath the bed frame, and realize the floor is lightly coated in a sheen of ice. Just thin enough to be invisible. Just thick enough to break your ankle on if you're not careful. This is your morning, every morning, from roughly November to early March, sometimes April, occasionally May, depending on the year. Because surprise climate back then wasn't quite as predictable as now. Historians still argue whether the so-called Little Ice Age that spanned from the 14th to 19th centuries was a global phenomenon, or mostly just a Northern Hemisphere ordeal. But what's not debated is this winter's got colder longer and much, much meaner during that time, so you sit up. You don't want to, but you do. Because you have to. Your joints ache. Your breath clouds the air. Your hands are stiff and slow, especially the fingers red cracked and already starting to split from the dry air. You slept with gloves on, but one fell off during the night. It's probably frozen somewhere in the bedding. You swing your legs out of bed and immediately regret it. The floor feels like it could give you frostbite just from standing on it barefoot. So you shuffle into your boots or what's left of them. Leather cracked, soles thin as parchment, stuffed with hay or rags or, if you're inventive, moss. You pull them on and say a silent prayer that today won't be the day they give out entirely. Fun fact, in 17th century Scotland, some poor households would hang their clothes over the dog to warm them slightly before dressing. Was it hygienic? No. Was it effective? Probably not. Did it feel less cold? Absolutely. You look around the room. The water bucket is, of course, frozen again. The surface is hard and glinting. You grab the iron poker from beside the hearth and give it a good crack, satisfying. But now you have ice chunks instead of water. You'll need to melt those later. Again. At least the fire didn't go out completely. You can nurse the embers, blow into them gently, add some kindling which you keep inside a dry box made of old roof shingles. You don't have much wood, though. Wood's expensive, or gone, or frozen solid. You might burn dried dung if you're desperate, and trust me, you are. No central heating, no vents, no warm tiles under your toes. Just this, a single hearth, and a prayer that the wind won't shift too hard against the chimney. You crouch in front of it, trying to light the day. You can feel one side of your face warm, while the other stays in icy shadow. You rotate like a spit. You glance up at the ceiling beams. There's frost there too inside. It's clinging to the corners where the warm air from your breath hits the cold wood. You reach up and tap one, and tiny flakes fall like snow. Inside snow. Who needs outside when the cold makes its own weather indoors? There's a quietness to the space that feels heavier in winter. Not peaceful, not cozy, just still. The air is dense with cold, like it's too thick to move through. It makes every creak louder, every cough sharper. You can hear the cracking of the wooden walls as they shift under the temperature changes. And outside, a branch snaps loudly under snow weight. You flinch. You always do. Winter doesn't knock softly. A scholarly debate has emerged in recent years about how people managed their mental health through months of near-total darkness, inactivity, and cold. Did they suffer more than we do today from seasonal affective disorder? Or were they just better at accepting it, folding it into their lives like a fifth-season misery we may never know? What we do know is that people didn't expect to be happy in winter. They expected to survive, and that meant waking up no matter how cold the room, how frozen the water, how numb the fingers, and getting to work. Outside, the snow continues to fall. You can hear it against the roof, a soft hiss like sand. It's not a storm yet, but you can feel the wind shift. Another front coming in. You haven't even made it outside yet, and already your body is bracing. You put on another layer, a coat made from someone's old coat, lined with rabbit fur if you're lucky. If not, just wool. Scratchy, unyielding wool that never quite dries and never quite warms up. But you pull it on, you always do, because you're not done freezing yet. You're not even properly awake, and already your fingers are trembling, not from fear, but from that deep, creeping cold that never fully leaves your joints in winter. You shuffle over to the fireplace where the embers are holding on for dear life and throw on a few twigs and some thinly sliced hope. You'd love to just sit here, just crouch like some soot-stained gargoyle and absorb what little heat exists in this brutal season. But winter doesn't care about your comfort. Winter asks, "What have you done for me lately?" You've got work to do. But first, some semblance of warmth. There is no central heating, no radiators clicking on with that satisfying hum. Just a fire that has to be built, babied, and begged. You add a log, not a big one. You can't afford big ones. You're saving those for actual emergencies, like when grandma's cough turns bad, or the baby starts shivering in her sleep. If you're lucky, and this is a big if you've got a metal warming pan, You'd fill it with hot coals and slide it under the bed covers before sleeping. Romantic in theory. In practice, it sometimes burned holes in the sheets, or worse, started small fires. The bed's warm, yes, but now it's also on fire. Trade-offs. Most families didn't even have those. They had stones, real ones, heated in the fire, wrapped in cloth and tossed in with the kids like prehistoric hot water bottles. Historians still argue whether this method caused more burns than it prevented. But the consensus is clear: anything was better than just lying there and freezing. You glance around the room, and here's a detail you may not expect: there's condensation forming on the inside of the wooden walls. That's not sweat. That's the house crying. The air is so cold it hurts to inhale deeply. Your nose is always running. Always. The tissue industry, if it existed, would be booming. But instead, you're wiping it on your sleeve like a medieval fashion statement. Your next move is to try warming something, anything. The water bucket is still frozen, so you throw some chunks in a pot and hang it over the fire. The iron hook creaks under the weight, and you watch as the ice hisses and melts into what barely passes for drinking water. You'll use the rest of it later to make porridge again. Oats are cheap. You have them every morning. The taste has long since become irrelevant. Texture gray. Flavor emotional numbness. And still you're one of the lucky ones. In poorer households, especially in cities like 18th century London or Paris, you didn't have a fireplace in every room. Maybe not even in any room. You relied on something called a foot warmer, which was just a clay pot filled with coals. You placed it under a stool and wrapped a blanket around your legs. Cozy, right? Until your blanket caught fire, or you knocked it over, and suddenly winter got a lot more exciting. There's a weird little fringe tidbit for you. In some Scandinavian villages, it was common to place hot bricks in socks and pass them around like little parcels of joy. Of course, once the brick cooled, the sock remained slightly burnt and charred forever. But who cares? Warm feet for 20 minutes is worth almost any price. You try to remember what it's like to feel warmth that comes from inside, not just borrowed heat from fire or fur or another human body. But it's hard to remember in this constant survival shuffle. You reach for your cloak, thick with soot around the collar, and pull it tight. You'll need it to face the day. Now it's time for the daily battle, the chamber pot. Yes, that quaint little ceramic bowl hiding under your bed. It's not elegant. It's not dignified. But it's necessary, especially when it's too cold to walk outside to the latrine, or worse, the outhouse. That poor excuse for a building is practically a wind tunnel for regret. You shuffle toward the corner holding the pot like a cursed relic and pray it didn't freeze overnight. Spoiler, it did. The contents are frozen into a sad little sculpture of human suffering. This right here is what historians gloss over. The raw, unfiltered reality of pre-modern life. If it's winter and you need to relieve yourself, you're going to be doing it near something that has already frozen solid. Nature is brutal, but so is plumbing or the lack thereof. And let's not even talk about bathing. You think you can just heat up a tub with what firewood? In what bathhouse gnome? Bathing in winter was a luxury, not a routine. People would strip grimace and rub snow on their armpits like some frost-bitten deodorant experiment. Or just wait until spring and hope their stink didn't offend the saints too much. You might be thinking, why didn't they just build better homes? Great question. They tried. Thicker walls, tighter seals, thatched roofs with snow barriers. But even castles, yes, actual stone castles, had tapestries on the walls, not for decoration, but to stop the wind from whistling through the masonry. Imagine being rich and still freezing. Money can't buy heat when physics is involved. You take a moment to step outside and grab some wood. Your breath curls like smoke in front of you, and the door creaks as if complaining about this entire decision. Outside, the world is still white, heavy, and utterly silent. Except for the crows. Why are crows always fine in winter? Nobody knows. You come back in, stamp the snow off your boots, and realize you've tracked mud everywhere. Frozen mud, yes, but still someone's going to yell. Probably you, at yourself. It's not even 7 a.m. You've been awake for barely an hour, and it already feels like you've survived a full day. You haven't eaten. You haven't gone outside properly. You haven't done a single chore. But winter doesn't care. Winter wants you to layer up freeze anyway and do it all with numb fingers and a smile that says, I accept my fate. So you reach for your clothes. Or more accurately, additional clothes. Because you've been sleeping in your first layer wool shirt, leggings, maybe a linen underlayer if you're lucky. Changing, not in this economy, not in this weather. You wear what's warmest, not what's cleanest. You start with another wool tunic. It's thick, heavy. It smells like, well, like old sheep. A mix of lanolin smoke and mildew. You throw it on anyway. Then the outer tunic. Then the cloak. Then the scarf. And the hat. Then another scarf because your ears will fall off if you don't. You don't dress for fashion. You dress like you're preparing to fight the wind in single combat. Gloves. You'd love gloves. Sadly, yours went missing last week, probably to the fire gods. Now your fingers are wrapped in cloth strips, uneven stained, but still better than bare skin. The cold doesn't care if you can grip a shovel or hold a spoon. The cold just is, and then the shoes. Or shoes. They're leather cracked with barely any sole left. You shove hay inside for insulation. Some folks use wool scraps. Some use straw or even moss. Anything that's dry, vaguely soft, and won't give you foot rot immediately. You might tie some twine around your ankles to hold the whole situation together. It's not elegant, but neither is frostbite. In fact, one quirky practice in the 16th century involved people stuffing dried animal dung, yes, dung, into their boots for insulation. Think of it like early unpleasant memory foam. Historians still debate whether that was a widespread practice or more of a last resort folk tradition, but hey, desperate times, desperate feet. Once you're dressed, you walk outside and it feels like walking into a slap. A wall of cold air punches you straight in the teeth. Your eyes water instantly. You try to blink away the sting, but your eyelashes are already sticking together from moisture freezing at the tips. The world is blindingly white. Not the pretty Instagram kind of white. This is aggressive white. Harsh light reflected off ice and snow scouring every surface. Your shadow is the only splash of color, gray and twitching as you walk. The village is quiet. Chimneys are smoking lazily. A dog somewhere barks once, then retreats back into its hay-lined corner. The snow is deep packed and squeaky. Every step crunches. Every step reminds you that you're going to have to do this again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. You're headed to fetch something. Maybe water. Maybe wood. Maybe the neighbor who owes you salted fish. And as you trudge, you pass others bundled in their own sad stacks of cloth and hope. No one really talks in the morning. The air is too cold to waste breath on words. You pull your scarf up over your nose. Your breath instantly dampens it. 5 minutes later, it's frozen stiff. You could break it off like a tortilla chip. It's a hazard, honestly. Last year, someone's scarf froze to their face and they had to pour hot wine on it to get it off. That's not a recommended solution, by the way. And don't even think about washing your clothes. Wet laundry turns into frozen sheets of misery within minutes. You'd have to beat them like rugs just to break the ice. Most people just wore the same set all winter. When it stood up by itself, that's when it was done. You notice your foot starting to tingle, that slow, creeping tingle that says, "Hey, you should check me before I go purple." So you stomp a bit, pretend it helps, and keep going. You're too far from home to turn back. A side note. Because this one's fun in medieval times. Especially in alpine villages, people would wear mittens inside their gloves. 2 layers, sometimes 3. And when gloves wore out, they'd just keep sewing patches onto patches until it looked more like a hand cocoon than a mitten. Functional, hideous, effective. You finally reach the shed, or the pile of logs, or the chicken coop, whatever task winter has handed you this morning. And you don't waste time. You move fast even if your limbs feel like they're filled with cold pudding. Work warms you up, slightly, briefly. Then the sweat cools and makes you colder again. It's a cruel cycle, and yet this is life. There are no shortcuts. You can't skip to spring. You endure. You layer. You work. You stay moving. Because in this world, motion is survival. Back home, you peel off the outer layers and hold your hands near the fire. They sting. The heat feels like knives. That's normal. Painful, but normal. And once the tingling turns to throbbing, then to a dull ache, you know, congratulations, your fingers are still alive. You're back inside now, your cheeks flushed, not from warmth, but from near frostbite. The tips of your fingers feel like they've been microwaved wrong, burning on the outside, frozen at the core. But at least you're back by the fire right. Wrong. Because now comes the next great ordeal of winter life, eating something that won't kill you. Food in winter is not about taste. It's not even about nutrition half the time. It's about survival, calories, bulk. Things that won't rot or freeze solid. Fresh vegetables gone weeks ago. Milk. The cows barely producing. Eggs. Only if your chicken didn't freeze or refuse to lay in protest. Winter food is beige, soft, repetitive, and occasionally deeply suspicious. You reach for the pot on the hearth. Inside porridge. Again. Oats water, maybe some salt if you've got it. It's thick, it's gray, and it tastes like warm wallpaper paste. But it fills your belly and stops your hands from shaking. Kind of. You remember when you had something green? Once. A cabbage. It was glorious. It also gave everyone gas for a week. Worth it. The fire crackles softly behind you as you choke down your breakfast. You chew slowly, because chewing quickly makes your teeth hurt. Yes, cold-sensitive teeth were a thing even then. And there's no dental plan in the 1500s. Just hope and clove oil. Some families keep dried meats on hand, smoked or salted until it resembles leather. You might shave off a corner, soak it in stew, and pretend it's delicious. Or maybe you have dried peas, dried beans, dried regret, all boiled until mushy and bland, like a punishment meal from a very boring god. In harsher climates, say the far north or high altitudes, fermented fish was common. That's right, rotting fish, eaten cold, with your bare hands. It's a cultural delicacy now, but back then it was just what's left. Fun fringe tidbit: in some parts of medieval Europe, people made black bread from rye flour mixed with sawdust. Yes, actual sawdust. Was it filling? Technically. Was it digestible? Barely. But it didn't freeze, and that made it a winter favorite. Historians still argue whether this kind of food insecurity was widespread or mostly limited to the poorest regions. Some wealthier households had access to root cellars, barrels of salted pork, dried fruits, even imported spices. But for the average person, it was turnips. Just turnips. In everything. Every day. For months. The occasional bright spot was when the beer didn't freeze, which it often did. You wrap your hands around a crude clay cup and sip something warm, possibly ale, possibly a broth made from yesterday's boiled bones. Either way, it burns a little going down, and that's a good sign. Warmth from the inside. It won't last long, but it's something. You eye the pantry, if you can call it that. A shelf nailed into the wall. There's a crock of pickled something. A loaf of bread that could double as a brick. Some shriveled apples. One onion. A single glorious onion. You're saving it for later. Maybe for a feast. Maybe for when you finally lose it and need to feel joy again. You sigh and poke at the fire. It's burning unevenly, so you shift the logs and drop in a few pine cones. They snap and pop like tiny fireworks. You can smell the resin. It's comforting in that I'm going to have to burn the furniture soon kind of way. Outside, it's still snowing. The flakes are big and slow now, drifting like sleepy feathers. Pretty, but deadly. Because the more it snows, the more your food sources vanish. The more animals burrow deeper. The more you wonder if you should have salted more turnips back in October. You're not alone in this. Everyone is struggling. Everyone is rationing. In some towns, they set up communal soup pots. Bring what you can, some beans, a bit of fat, a crust of bread, and it all goes in. A murky, weird-tasting, deeply unsatisfying stew that somehow manages to keep people alive. You recall the old tales told by the hearth, of wolves that came into villages, of children who wandered off and never came back, of the time the river froze so solid an entire cart fell in and vanished when it thawed weeks later. Storytelling was a survival tool, too, not just to pass time, but to explain the madness of it all. And you think about spring, distant, abstract, not a certainty, just a promise whispered through cracked lips. Because the brutal truth is not everyone makes it to spring. The very old, the very young, the sick, the unlucky, winter thins the herd. You scrape your bowl clean with the corner of bread and chew it slowly. Hard as stone, dry as chalk, but somehow satisfying. You swallow, stand, and stretch. Your back cracks, not from age, just from sleeping curled up like a salted fish. You walk toward the door again. Time to check the animals. Time to fetch more wood. Time to face the cold that never lets up. The cold that makes eating porridge seem like a luxury, that turns a hot drink into a holy experience. You pull your cloak tight, brace yourself, and step back outside into a world that, for all its brightness, feels like it's holding its breath, waiting to see who'll make it. You step outside again, and this time your joints creak louder than the door hinges. The cold greets you like an old enemy. It doesn't sneak up on you. It just waits there, smug and heavy. You pull your cloak tighter and exhale slowly. That familiar cloud of breath rises in front of your face, curling like ghost smoke before vanishing into the gray. It's still early, but the world's already been awake for hours. Chickens need feeding, animals need watering, and someone needs to break through the ice in the trough again. Guess who? You trudge toward the animal pen with a bucket that's somehow both too cold to hold and too heavy to drop. Your boots crunch over the packed snow now mixed with mud and straw and regret. You reach the trough, and just like yesterday and the day before, it's frozen solid. You slam the end of your wooden ladle against the ice until it cracks, splinters, and finally yields enough to dip a bucket. There's water underneath, brownish, probably filled with floating hay or worse. But the animals don't care. And honestly, neither do you anymore. The cows are lethargic, their breath misting in thick puffs. The pigs are buried under piles of straw, only an occasional grunt giving away their location. Chickens mutter under their breath like tiny old men. You scatter feed and check for eggs, but you already know the answer: none today. It's too cold. Their tiny chicken souls have decided this isn't worth it. People often romanticize the past, talk about the simple life. But there is nothing simple about trying to keep things alive in a season that wants everything dead. And let's not forget your own body in all this. Your back aches. Your hands are raw. Your nails are brittle. You've got chilblains forming those painful, itchy red bumps that show up when your skin gives up on temperature regulation. A lovely gift from nature that says you are not adapting fast enough, peasant. Historians still debate whether segmented sleep, two separate chunks of rest with a wakeful period in between, was a response to environmental factors like cold, or more of a cultural phenomenon. Either way, your sleep has not been continuous. You're tired in a way that seeps into your soul. You make your way back inside and collapse onto the bench near the fire. It's still burning. Barely. But you can't sit for long. You have to go chop wood. Again, your axe handle is splintered from overuse. Your gloves, well, you already know about those. The woodpile is half covered in snow, and most of the logs have moisture in them, which means they hiss and spit when burned. They technically give off heat, but not the kind that stays in your bones. It's more of a performance than actual warmth. And yes, you've heard the old saying, chopping wood warms you twice, once when you chop it, once when you burn it. But that saying assumes you have enough energy to laugh about it. You do not. You're halfway between a grunt and a sigh at all times. Fun fact, in some alpine communities, people insulated their walls not with wool or fabric, but with cow dung, pressed into bricks and layered between boards. Smelled like misery, but worked like a charm. Quirky, gross, effective, like most winter solutions. You haul the wood back inside, arms aching, and finally sit down again, just in time for that strange, sleepy middle-of-the-day lull. You've eaten, you've worked, but it's too cold to go far too dark to do much else, and your body is begging for rest. So you do what many people historically did: you nap. Not deep, luxurious napping. More like collapsing into a blanket cocoon and breathing slowly until your brain lets go. Sleep comes in waves. An hour here, 30 minutes there. Always interrupted by the sound of wind creaking beams or someone shouting that a chicken has escaped again. They never get far. Sleep isn't restful, it's strategic. You're constantly adjusting your position, shifting away from cold spots or curling tighter under the blanket to preserve the last bit of heat from your tea. You might wake up with one foot outside the cover and think, well, that's gone now. Goodbye, foot. And when the sun dips, if you even noticed it rise, it's time to start thinking about nighttime again. The fire needs feeding. The animals need checking. And you need to mentally prepare for another long, cold night. The wind howls against the walls like a creature trying to get in. You stuff rags into the gaps in the window frame and lay a blanket across the door. Not for security, for insulation. A wild animal wouldn't want to come in. But the wind always finds a way. And through it all, you know this is just one of many days like this. No sudden thaw, no surprise sunshine, just cold silence and chores. Day after day after day. But you keep moving. You keep working. Because in winter, that's the secret. If you stop for too long, if you let the stillness in, you won't want to move again. By now, the cold has moved in like a permanent tenant. It doesn't knock. It doesn't leave. It just settles in your muscles and makes itself comfortable, whispering into every task, this could be worse, but it won't be better. You take a deep breath that hurts a little, going in sharp and dry like inhaling paper, and you know it's time for chores. Again. Because yes, even now with frost on the inside of your window and your soul feeling 2 degrees below freezing, there's work to do. You step back outside, boots crunching over the snow that's developed a thin crust on top, just enough to mock you. You break through it with every step, which makes walking somehow more exhausting and less productive. You've got animals to tend wood, to stack ice, to break, and the ever-present need to keep things from dying. That's the goal now. Not thriving, just not dying. First stop, feed the animals again. They look at you like they're equally tired of this. The cow gives a half-hearted moo that sounds like it could also mean send help. You dump hay into the trough, knock the ice out of the water bowl again, and mentally calculate how long your feed stores might last. Spoiler, not long. It's the middle of winter, and you're already rationing like it's wartime. Because in a way it is. A long, slow, boring war with nature, and nature is winning. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows. Late, of course. Probably frozen halfway through the first try. Chores like these don't change. They don't get exciting. They just have to happen. Every single day. You chop the same wood. You scatter the same feed. You patch the same drafty corner with the same useless rag that always falls down again 5 minutes later. Historians often talk about the rhythms of pre-modern life. The slow, seasonal pace. The harmony with nature. But they don't always mention that this rhythm often felt like a funeral march during winter. Still, the work must go on. You head to the well next if you're lucky enough to have one. The rope is stiff. The bucket creaks as it lowers, and when it comes back up, there's a layer of ice already forming on the surface. You chip at it with your knife and hope the handle doesn't freeze to your hand like last week. Speaking of hands, yours are red raw and lined with little cracks where the skin has split. You wrap them again this time in whatever fabric was dry. Even if it smells like onions, which it probably does. A strange little fact in some rural parts of Europe, people used to rub goose fat on their hands and feet before putting on gloves or socks. It acted as a kind of barrier against the cold. Slippery, yes. Slightly smelly, absolutely. Effective, surprisingly, yes. So if you're ever tempted to complain about hand lotion, Just remember, goose fat was the original moisturizer. Your next task is repairing the shed door. Again, the wood warped in the cold and won't close all the way anymore. You wrestle it into place and hammer a wedge under it. Temporary solutions like everything else in winter. By now your body's warm from moving, but not in a comforting way. You're sweating under the layers, and the sweat cools faster than it should. You know the feeling: hot skin, cold air, and the creeping dread that you're going to regret this in about 20 minutes when the chill sinks through your damp shirt. There's no break, no real rest. You eat standing up. You work until dark. And once the sun goes down and with it the illusion of warmth, you head back inside. It's dim now. Candlelight flickers against the walls. The fire burns low and the air inside the house is slightly less cold than it was this morning. Not warm, just less cold. You take off your cloak and boots, set them near the hearth, and stretch out your back until it cracks like ice underfoot. Someone's boiling soup. Or at least water with things floating in it. Could be potato peel. Could be old cabbage. Could be something mysterious from the bottom of the pantry you swore you threw out 2 weeks ago. You don't care. It's hot. It smells vaguely edible. You eat it, and you don't eat alone. In winter, privacy is a fantasy. Everyone sleeps together, eats together, and endures together. You huddle near the fire with your family, or maybe just the people you live with out of necessity. Shared blankets, shared meals, shared complaints, and sometimes shared beds. You might be sleeping next to your brother, your cousin, a traveling merchant, who paid for a warm floor corner with a loaf of bread. It's not weird. It's winter. Body heat is currency. Historians still debate whether this practice, communal sleeping with non-family members, was driven by necessity, hospitality, or just cultural norms. The answer is probably all three. When survival's on the line, modesty melts faster than snow on a skillet. You finish your soup. Your stomach still growls a little, but you ignore it. You pull your blanket tighter and listen to the wind howl outside. You think, I've made it through another day. And in winter, that's the only metric that matters. Night falls quickly in winter, not a gentle fade, but more like someone slamming a lid shut on the world. One moment there's a dull gray glow outside. The next, blackness presses up against the windows, thicker than ink. The only light left is what you make yourself: candle stubs, the hearth's glow, or the amber flicker of oil lamps, if you're lucky enough to afford them. Inside, the cold creeps back in with the darkness. The fire burns low. You feed it again, carefully rationed wood, stacked like treasure. You toss on one more log, but not too many. You need enough to make it to spring. You settle in for the evening. Your bones ache. Your muscles are stiff. And your breath still puffs visibly every time you sigh. Even wrapped in a blanket, the chill finds you. It sneaks through the floorboards, trickles down the chimney, and seeps through the walls like a ghost with poor social boundaries. Then, just as your body begins to relax, someone sneezes, loud, wet. A chorus of sniffles follows. You brace yourself because here it comes, the winter plague, or something like it. Sickness in winter is not a surprise. It's expected, anticipated. The moment the air turns cold, people start coughing like it's a group project. And back then, getting sick didn't mean 3 days of tea and Netflix. It meant real risk. Fever dangerous, chills, worse. A sore throat. Pack your things, it's probably your final act. You glance at your cousin in the corner, pale, coughing into a cloth. You pretend not to see the blood. Everyone does. Because what are your options, a doctor? Only if you live in a town and have money. Medicine. Sure, if you count onion poultices and prayers. Fun fringe fact, in some places they used to rub goose grease on a child's chest to help with coughing. Mix it with soot and honey, and it became a kind of weird medieval Vicks vapor rub. Did it work? Unclear. But it definitely made the kids smell interesting. You sip something warm, herbal tea maybe, or a decoction of bark and roots boiled so long it tastes like forest-flavored sadness. But it soothes your throat slightly, and that's enough. You pull your blanket up higher, and remember the rules: stay warm, stay hydrated. Don't share utensils and sleep sitting up if your chest feels tight. Also, don't cough near the baby, or the elderly, or literally anyone, because in these cramped quarters, one sneeze can be a declaration of war. Historians still argue whether wintertime mortality spikes were primarily due to respiratory illness, food scarcity, or complications from malnutrition. The answer is all of the above. Your immune system is working with low fuel in freezing temps, while sleeping 3 inches from someone already halfway to the afterlife. You doze. Not sleep, doze. You drift in and out. You wake up with your mouth dry and your toes colder than they should be. You fall back asleep and wake again when the fire snaps too loud. This is the cycle, over and over. You're not even surprised when you wake up to someone groaning in the night. A fever, a stomachache, something ominous. You stare at the rafters, counting knots in the wood, trying not to imagine worst-case scenarios. Then someone calls your name, low urgent. The chamber pot's frozen again. You get up because you're the one closest to the fire and the only one whose boots aren't still wet from yesterday. You break the ice in the pot, a sentence you never thought you'd live through, and grumble the whole time. But deep down you know this is the job. Everyone suffers together. That's the rule. A tiny fact to distract you: in some parts of rural Russia, families would sleep in a single room with their livestock. Not outside, not in a barn, in the same room. The warmth from the animals helped keep the temperature just barely survivable. Unhygienic. Warm also, yes. And in winter, warmth beats cleanliness every time. You return to bed more like a shared heap of straw and blankets and curl up like a cat trying to disappear. Your back is cold. Your nose is colder. But at least your feet are pressed against someone else's and slowly warming. Probably. Maybe. The coughs continue. So do the whispers. Someone's praying quietly. Not for miracles, just for tomorrow, for one more day. The wind outside is howling now. Not poetic, not romantic, angry. It pushes against the walls, rattles the shutters, moans through the cracks in the roof like it's trying to get in and finish what the fever started. You stare at the ceiling again. It's darker than dark. Your mind drifts. What if you don't get better? What if they don't? You shake it off. Because you can't afford those thoughts. No one can. You focus on the warmth in your hands, the softness of the blanket, the flicker of light from the hearth. You're still here. You made it through another day, and in winter that's more than enough. Morning arrives like an insult, not a sunrise. Just a slow gray bloom of light that leaks into the room through a warped shutter. There's no fanfare, no bird song, just the usual chorus of sniffles, creaking bones, and the wet cough that someone really should be concerned about by now. You blink slowly, aware of every cold inch of your body. Your back aches from the awkward sleep angle. Your feet are still wrapped in someone else's cloak. Your neck is stiff, and your face is numb again. You rub it and flakes of frost come off. Delightful. Outside it's still snowing, or maybe it snowed again. It's hard to tell where one storm ends and another begins in this endless white blur. You hear someone mutter, still like they expected spring to show up overnight. But spring doesn't sneak into places like this. It fights its way in, eventually, probably. You throw off the blanket, wince, and stretch your arms overhead. A few satisfying pops in your shoulders. That's the closest thing you'll get to joy this morning. Then comes the quiet part of winter, that no one talks about the darkness. Not the kind outside, the kind inside. The kind that settles in your chest when every day is the same. Cold, gray, silent. You stare at the wall for a long minute. It's cracked, damp. A faint trail of ice creeps along the windowsill like a slow-growing vine. You know that you have to move, but your body doesn't want to. You feel heavy, not tired, just done. Historians still argue whether people in pre-industrial societies experienced seasonal depression in the same way we understand it today. There are records of melancholia in winter months, people becoming withdrawn, sluggish, overwhelmed by sadness. But there was no vocabulary for mental health. Only phrases like a sorrow that lingers or the winter gloom. You know exactly what they meant. The light outside is thin, useless, the kind of light that makes everything look sadder. You get up anyway. You have to, because stillness in winter isn't peaceful, it's dangerous. You shuffle over to the fire. It's gone out. You knew it would, but you still feel betrayed. You poke at the ashes, find a few warm coals, and start the whole desperate dance again, tinder twigs, kindling breath. The smoke stings your eyes as it curls up the chimney. As the fire catches, you wrap yourself in your cloak and stare into the flames. They're mesmerizing. They make shadows flicker on the walls, and for a second you feel like you're not entirely alone. You sip something warm, barely tea, maybe just hot water, with a hint of bark, and listen to the world waking up in the most miserable way. Someone groans. Someone else coughs. The wind picks up and rattles the shutters. You look out the window, and everything is white. The path to the well is gone. The road to the village is gone. The tree line gone. Just endless, pale nothing. There's a kind of panic that sets in when you realize you're snowed in. Not the modern kind where you binge shows in pajamas. The old kind. The serious kind, the we may not get another supply run for weeks kind. The I hope we stored enough flour and salt pork or we're going to be making soup out of shoe leather kind. A fringe detail in 17th century northern France. There were entire regional recipes dedicated to crisis stews, thick gluey concoctions made from flour water, and whatever root vegetable hadn't gone soft yet. Add a bone for flavor if you had one. If not, pretend. You think about food, but you're not hungry. Not really. You just want color. Something that isn't brown or gray or white. You open the door and step out. It's quiet. The snow is deep up to your calves in some places. You trudge toward the shed. Your breath huffs like smoke from a dragon's nostrils. Every step is deliberate. Every movement makes your muscles ache. But you keep going. Because in winter, you either do the thing or you don't survive. You reach the woodshed and start chopping kindling. Again. Your hands are raw. Your knuckles are cracked. But the rhythm helps. Thunk, Crack, breathe, thunk, crack. Don't think. You pause. Listen. It's so quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Hollow quiet. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. You suddenly miss birdsong. You miss the smell of grass. You miss the sound of people shouting across fields. You miss warmth, not just temperature, but the feeling of warmth. The kind that spreads from the inside out. It's been so long you're not sure you'd recognize it if it came. You stack the wood and head back inside, brushing snow off your shoulders. You stamp your boots by the door and step into the room where everyone's still bundled up in silence. You don't speak. No one does. Winter wears down language. After a while, there's nothing left to say. You sit by the fire and stare into it again. Flames dance. Shadows stretch. You curl up and rest your head on your knees. And for a moment, you close your eyes, not because you're sleepy, but because you're tired. Of the cold, of the quiet, of the sameness. But you'll keep going, because that's what winter demands. One more day, one more breath. The wind is louder today. Not howling, moaning. A low, constant sound that creeps under the doorframe, slides between the cracks in the shutters, and makes the rafters groan like an old man getting out of bed. You sit still and listen. It's not just wind. It's winter's voice, a long, slow whisper saying, "Still here." You shiver, but not from cold. You're used to cold. No, this is the other kind of shiver, the kind that dances up your spine when you realize how deeply winter seeps into everything, even your thoughts. You sip from your mug. Lukewarm now. It tastes like boiled roots and faint desperation. But it's warm enough. That's what counts. There's a knock on the door, soft 3 raps. That's the signal. You rise stiff and open it. It's your neighbor, or what's left of him under all those layers. He steps in quickly, shaking snow off like a wet dog. His beard is frozen. His nose is red. He looks like a man who's been wrestling the wind all morning and losing. He carries a bag. You know what's in it, superstition. Yes, today's the day. The once-a-month midwinter visit. In the absence of medicine, central heat, or functioning optimism, you turn to what's left: belief. The old kind. He spreads the contents on the table. A bundle of herbs. A scrap of paper with a symbol drawn in charcoal. A lump of iron shaped like a star. These aren't solutions. They're rituals. Comfort in practice, not result. He starts to talk in low tones. Best to hang one by the door, he mutters, pointing to the charm. Wards off sickness. Maybe the cough'll ease. You nod, not because you believe, but because you need to believe in something. Superstition and winter go hand in hand. When logic freezes, solid folklore steps in. Fun little tidbit: in 15th century Germany, it was believed that if icicles formed pointing toward a door, it meant death would visit the house before spring. Some families broke off icicles as soon as they appeared, just in case. Historians still argue whether these practices were purely symbolic or rooted in misunderstood observations like mold drafts or bad air. But when the alternative is helplessness, even the oddest ritual feels like insurance. You help him hang the charm. A twisted bundle of dried sage garlic and something that smells faintly like regret. It dangles just above the door frame, swinging slightly in the draft. You offer him stew. He declines. Too thick, he says, rubbing his chest. Haven't been keeping food down. That's not good. You both know it, but you don't say it. He sits by the fire a while. No words. Just 2 people absorbing warmth, silence between them thick as the soup. Then he nods, wraps his scarf tighter, and leaves. You watch him vanish into the white. The door closes with a soft thud. Later that day, someone finds a dead crow on the snowbank near your shed. You don't touch it. You don't speak of it. Because winter isn't just weather, it's omens, signs, and whispered warnings from the trees. Everything means something. A creak in the floorboards, a spirit passing through. A sudden gust down the chimney, a restless soul, a crack in the ice, fate flicking its finger. That might sound absurd now, but when you're alone, cold, and 6 weeks into salted turnips, your brain starts filling in the silence with stories. Superstition is warmth for the mind. You remember your grandmother once told you not to sweep the hearth after sundown. It invited things in. You do it anyway. Nothing happens. But when the wind howls louder that night, you start to wonder. You start seeing shapes in the snow outside. Not people. Possibilities. A woman in white, maybe. A flicker of red in the woods. A set of footprints that go nowhere. You laugh at yourself. Just once. Just a breathy little chuckle. And then you throw another log on the fire. It's dark again. The candle guttered out hours ago. Your fingers smell like ash and garlic. The iron charm above the door creaks in the wind, and you stare at it with the kind of intensity normally reserved for uninvited guests. You don't believe in these things. Of course not. You're practical. But you still tuck a clove of garlic under your pillow. Just in case. You wake to the sound of laughter. Actual laughter. For a second, your frozen brain assumes it's a dream. Or madness. Or maybe a side effect of eating that sketchy root stew last night. But no, there it is again. A whoop. A shout. A thud. The unmistakable, impossible sound of joy. You stagger to the window, wiping the frost from the pane with the sleeve of your cloak. Outside, kids are pelting each other with snowballs the size of turnips. One goes down dramatically. There's applause. It's not just the children either. A few adults are out. Bundled, sure. Miserable looking, definitely. But they're there. One man slides across the snow on a piece of roof tile. A woman laughs so hard she drops her firewood. No one even yells at her. It's surreal, because today it seems is festival day. Yes, even in the depths of brutal, biting winter, people in history made time for celebration. Not because life was easy, but because it was hard. When everything is bleak, you make your own brightness. You hurry to dress 4 layers, 3 scarves, and the good mittens, the ones that still have all the fingers. Outside, the air is still icy, but there's a feeling in it that's lighter. Welcome to Saturnalia, or Yule, or Midwinter's Feast. Depending on your place and time, this could be a Roman riot, a Norse bonfire, or a medieval mummers' parade complete with questionable masks and a donkey indoors for some reason. Historians still debate which traditions came from where, how much the Christian church absorbed what was pagan and what was just good old-fashioned cabin fever turned into song and drink. But the purpose was always the same: survive by celebrating. Someone hands you a piece of bread soaked in wine. You eat it without asking what kind of wine it was, or how old the bread was. Doesn't matter. It's edible and mildly intoxicating. That's a win. Children are dragging sleds made from everything except actual sleds, barrel lids, wooden planks, basket lids. A dog runs by in a sweater made from someone's old sleeve. It looks proud. There's a bonfire in the center of the village despite the firewood shortage. It crackles defiantly, hissing as snowflakes land on the logs. People stand around it, palms open, talking, smiling, remembering what it's like to feel normal. You see someone dressed as the Winter King, a man with a bushy beard and a fur cloak wearing a crown made of branches and icicles. He waves at the kids and throws candy, or what passes for it, nuts, dried fruit, little chunks of honeycomb. A fringe fact in some medieval towns, a mock king was chosen to rule the feast, usually the most absurd person possible. A fool, a jester, a child. They'd issue fake proclamations and boss around the town elders for a day. It was chaos. It was weird. It was glorious. People sang. Off-key. Loud. No one cared. There were carols, chants, and rhymes that made no sense. One old man recited a poem about pickled beets and swore it brought good luck. Someone else countered with a limerick about a cow that got stuck in a chimney. Classic stuff. You take a deep breath. The air smells like smoke, cider, and joy. A rare combination. You hear drums. Well, buckets being hit with sticks, but the idea is the same. A rhythm. A heartbeat. People dancing in their heavy clothes, stomping the snow flat with their boots. It's not graceful, but it's defiant. Winter can take your crops, your toes, your sanity. But it can't take this. And then there's the food. A table has been laid out. Nothing fancy. But enough. There's thick soup in blackened pots. Bread hard as stone but warm. A pie of unknown filling, possibly turnip, probably regret. A jug of mead. A slab of roasted something. You eat. You don't ask. You just eat and laugh and clap when the children put on a play that makes no sense at all. A snowman falls over mid-monologue. Standing ovation. It's not warm. Not by any stretch. Your feet are frozen. Your cheeks are wind-burned. But you feel lighter. Like for a few hours, the weight of survival has been lifted. As night falls, the dancing slows. People drift home, hands full of leftovers and good gossip. The fire dies down to glowing coals. You head back to your cottage with a full belly and half a smile. Back inside, the cold greets you again. Familiar, inevitable. But this time you don't resent it quite as much. Because today you remembered what it felt like to live, not just endure. Tomorrow will be hard again. The snow will still fall. The food will still run low. But tonight you danced in the snow. The morning after the festival is always the hardest. Your muscles ache in places you forgot existed. Your throat is scratchy, not from illness for once, but from laughing. Your boots are still damp, your cloak still smells like bonfire smoke, and something vaguely sticky that might have been cider or spilled soup. But even with the fatigue, there's a softness to the silence today. The wind is still whispering through the shutters, but it sounds less angry. Like winter's a bit tired too. Maybe it danced last night too. Maybe it's willing to let you catch your breath. You roll out of your straw bed with less resistance than usual. Maybe joy, like warmth, lingers a little in the bones. Breakfast is quiet. Thin porridge again, but someone threw in a handful of dried berries left over from the feast. You chew slowly, savoring the tiny burst of sweetness like it's gold. Because in winter, luxury isn't silk or spices, it's flavor. You pull on your layers with a little less dread. Maybe your socks are still wet. Maybe your gloves are still missing. But today you'll survive again. And that feels more possible. Outside, the snow has crusted over into a glittering shell. It crunches underfoot like sugar. The sky is still the color of tin, but there's a faint, half-hearted sun peeking through. You squint up at it like a long-lost friend. You forgive it. You're just happy it showed up. You head to the neighboring house, the widow down the lane who didn't make it to the festival. Her roof is smoking, which is a good sign. Her goats are loud, which is an even better one. You knock once and leave a small loaf of yesterday's bread on her stoop. A quiet gift. That's how survival works here, not alone but together. Winter teaches you that warmth isn't just heat, it's community. This is the season when soup gets shared between houses, when fences get repaired by people who don't live behind them, when someone hears a cough through thin walls and shows up with herbs broth and a joke. Maybe not a good one, but good enough. In the village square, a group is gathered. They're splitting firewood and gossiping. Someone's chopping, someone's stacking, someone else is just there for commentary. And you know what? That's enough. You join in. You lend your hands. You lend your ears. You lend your presence, and that's more valuable than any coin. A quirky tidbit: in many old European villages, there was a tradition called the winter ring. It was a circle of mutual help, neighbors agreeing to check in on one another, share food, pass along kindling, or even take turns warming each other's homes by sitting with the fire to keep it going. No one survived alone. You listen to the stories being passed around. Most are nonsense. Some are important. All of them are warm. A man retells how he once mistook his own shadow for a wolf and threw a rock at it. Another claims he saw a fox wearing a scarf last night. Someone else insists that if you don't sweep your front step by sundown on Thursdays, you'll invite hunger spirits. He's mostly ignored. Mostly. You smile at the absurdity, but deep down you appreciate it. These little rituals, these shared fictions, they bind the days together like knots in a rope. They pull you forward. Historians still argue whether these community practices were born out of necessity or belief. But the truth is, it doesn't matter. They worked. They kept people alive. Not just physically, but emotionally. Back at home, you make a small stew, a thin one, but you double the batch. Not because you're extra hungry, but because someone else might be. And sure enough, before sunset, a knock at the door. A boy from the other side of the village. His mother is unwell. You hand him a jar of soup. He doesn't say much, but his hands linger a second longer around yours. Enough to say thank you. That night, the fire burns a little longer. The logs crack loudly, sending sparks up the chimney. You wrap yourself in your cloak and sit by the flames, staring into the flicker. Outside, the snow falls again, slowly, softly, less like a threat, more like a lullaby. You can still hear someone humming in the house next door. You don't know the tune. It doesn't matter. You let it carry you into sleep. Together apart, it starts with a hiss. A subtle one just above a whisper, like the sound a kettle makes before it boils, but there's no kettle. You blink awake. It's early, still dark. The fire's gone cold, but that sound, the hiss, is still there. You get up slowly, every joint stiff, your breath fogging in front of you. The sound is coming from the chimney. Then a loud whoomph. A downdraft of icy wind slaps through the hearth and fills the room with ash. The fire didn't just go out, it was shoved out. You cough, brush soot from your blanket, and mutter under your breath words that would get you banned from the town church. You grab a log, your flint, and try again. This has become routine. Because fire in winter isn't just warmth, it's life support. And old fireplaces were often more decorative than functional. All draft little heat. They pulled more warmth out of the room than they gave back. You wonder how the architect responsible is sleeping these days. Probably in a much warmer place. So you hunch down, coax the flame back, and stare into it as it flickers reluctantly to life. Your eyes sting, your fingers sting, and your pride stings. Because no matter how many times you do this, it always feels like winter is laughing at you. But there's hope. You feel it in the way the air moves. The cold isn't so sharp. The windows aren't so frosted. Outside, you swear the snow looks less angry. Because here's the thing, the worst of winter might be behind you. You don't say it out loud. That's bad luck. You just nod quietly to yourself and start preparing for the day. Today's chore, chimney cleaning. You'd think with all the cold, you'd burn the fire clean. But soot builds fast, especially with the wet wood you've been forced to use. If you don't clean it, the smoke won't pull. If the smoke doesn't pull, the room fills with ash. If the room fills with ash, well, let's just say the term housewarming takes on a different meaning. You grab the broom, the long stick, the rag bundle you tied together weeks ago, and get to it. It's a dirty, grimy, miserable job. But that's winter. There's no such thing as a clean task, only degrees of soot. As you scrub, you think about how far you've come. When the first frost hit you, panicked. When the snow came, you braced. When the food stores dwindled, you rationed. When sickness crept in, you prayed. And yet you're still here. And not just you. The whole village is starting to shift in mood. People are opening shutters more, standing outside longer. The goats are louder. The chickens are laying again, one egg, two if they're feeling generous. Small things, but they mean something. You remember what an old farmer once told you? Spring don't come all at once, it tiptoes. That feels true. You can hear it now. Not in birdsong, not yet. But in the drip, drip, drip of melting icicles. In the shift of snow becoming slush. In the creaking of beams that aren't straining so hard anymore. Here's a quirky historical note for you. In some mountain villages, people would predict spring's arrival by watching how fast the dung heap thawed. If steam rose steadily, good news. If it stayed frozen, past Candlemas buckle up. Historians still argue whether ancient calendars were really tied to seasons or just celestial cycles. Either way, people had to read the land, because weather forecasts, not a thing. You looked at the trees, you tasted the wind, you stared at the sky and hoped your bones were telling the truth. You head outside after lunch and notice something shocking: mud. Actual slushy, wet, squelchy mud. You've been walking on hard-packed snow and ice for weeks, but now your boots sink just a little. It's messy, but it's promising. You catch your reflection in a puddle. You look wild, eyes tired, hair everywhere, face chapped, and yet you smile. Because this is what survival looks like. You pass by neighbors. They nod. They smile. One waves. Someone else shouts, 3 eggs today, like they've won a lottery. And honestly, they kind of have. You help a woman fix her fence, the posts finally soft enough to hammer without splitting. You laugh when her son falls into a snowdrift that's hollowed underneath. He comes out soaked and laughing. Laughing. The sound is contagious. Back home, you stripped your wet boots and hang them near the hearth. You peel off your outer layers and rub warmth back into your fingers. The room smells like stew and smoke, a good combination for once. You sit by the fire and let the moment stretch. Outside, the sky shifts from gray to something like blue, almost blue. Not quite spring, but close enough to believe in it. It happens slowly. You wake up one morning and realize your nose isn't cold. You reach for your blanket and your fingers don't sting. You sit up and there's no frost clinging to the edge of the window. You exhale and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, you don't see your breath. You blink. You wait. You don't move as if sudden motion might scare it away. But no, it's real. Something has shifted. The air still has a bite, but it's a soft one. Like winter is losing its edge. The great icy beast is tired now, lumbering off into the woods to rest. And in its place, something else is waking up. You get dressed 2 layers, not 5. The coat still goes on, but you leave it unbuttoned. Reckless, maybe. But that's what hope feels like, slightly foolish warmth. Outside, the snow is patchy. Bare earth shows through in streaks. The mud is thick and treacherous, sucking at your boots like it's missed you. But even that is welcome. After all, mud is just snow learning to let go. There's water dripping from the eaves. The sun, not a vague suggestion of light, but an actual golden disk, is out. You raise your face toward it and close your eyes. Warm. It's not hot, not yet. But it's warm. The kind that seeps into your scalp, presses gently against your eyelids, and whispers, "You made it." You head to the well, and find the bucket still wet from yesterday, not frozen. A miracle. You lower it, hear the splash, and pull it up easily. No cracking ice, no splintered fingers, just water, as it should be. Someone sweeping their stoop nearby, whistling a half-remembered tune. A child runs by barefoot. You almost stop them. Are you mad? But then you see the grin on their face and let them go. Spring fever has officially arrived. Fun fringe fact. In some medieval towns, the first barefoot child of spring was believed to bring luck to the whole street. Of course, it also brought a decent chance of pneumonia, but hey, small price for communal morale. Historians still debate how spring festivals formed, whether they evolved from pagan fertility rites, agricultural milestones, or just the desperate need to feel joy again. But the consensus is clear: spring wasn't just a season, it was resurrection. You make your way to the edge of the village. The woods are darker than the fields, but even they are beginning to stir. Sap flows. Birds return. You hear one now, a thin chirp like a question. "Hello, is it safe?" You want to chirp back. "Yes, we're okay now." Your chores are the same, but they feel different. You repair the fence with lighter hands. You feed the animals and they move easier, less sluggish. The chickens are practically strutting. One lays a perfect egg right in front of you. You consider applauding. You tidy the woodshed. You sweep out the corners of the barn. You find a moldy turnip that smells like regret and victory. You bury it in the thawing ground like an offering to the soil. Inside, the house smells different. The air is clearer, lighter. You open the window on purpose. The breeze is still cold, but it's fresh, alive. You leave it open. You strip the beds and beat the straw mattress outside. Dust explodes in the sunlight, shimmering like fireflies. You cough, but you're smiling. That night you eat stew with actual flavor. A sprig of wild onion you found near the melting creek. You chew it slowly. It tastes like the color green. You've missed that, and the fire still lit. But smaller, less desperate. It's no longer your lifeline, just your companion. You fall asleep easily, fully horizontal. No huddling, no shivering, no extra cloak balled under your feet. Your dreams are softer now, and in the distance you hear frogs. Frogs. Not wind, not wolves, frogs. And you think as you drift away, we made it. You wake before the sun, not because it's cold, not anymore, but because your body, trained by months of survival, still rises early. But this time it's different. There's a calmness in your bones. No urgency. No ache. You stretch under the blanket, now too warm, and roll onto your back, letting the moment stretch as wide as the silence around you. The fire has burned low, but not out. The coals glow gently like a lullaby, still humming in the dark. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed and touch your feet to the floor. No flinch. The boards are cool, not punishing. You smile, just a little. Outside, the birds are already working. Not just one or two dozens. Singing like they've been holding their breath all winter, too. You step to the door, creak it open, and breathe in the morning air. It's damp, earthy, alive. The snow is nearly gone. Here and there, small piles hang on in the shadows, but most of the ground is free, dark, rich soil patches of green pushing upward like fingers breaking through sleep. It's spring now. Not almost, not maybe, now. You put the kettle over the fire. The water warms quickly. You sip slowly, watching the steam curl toward the ceiling beams, no longer frosted. You don't need to huddle close anymore. The warmth is around you now, not just within the fire. You go outside to work, but the work feels different. There's no frost to scrape, no ice to break. You mend a fence. You turn the soil. You check the roof tiles, some slipped during the storms. You fix them whistling quietly like your neighbor. Children pass by chasing each other with sticks. One carries a frog, another a dandelion. The youngest has a bruise and a grin. You pass the widow again, she's sweeping her stoop. You offer to carry her kindling. She says no proudly. She's stronger now too. You walk further than you have in months, just to walk. The snowdrops are blooming. The creek is moving. The wind hums through the trees, not cruel now, but curious. You pass a small hill and see someone planting something. A new garden. Fresh earth, hopeful hands. They glance up and nod. You nod back, and then you pause. Stand still. Look around. The world is back. It never really left. But now you see it again. And it sees you. Your hands are rough, your boots still patched. Your body still remembers the ache of snow and wind and endless gray, but you made it. You made it. You go home that night and light the fire out of habit, not necessity. It's ceremonial now. A soft glow to end the day, not a battle cry. You sit near it and let your eyes close. And the cold, it's still out there. It always will be. But you know now it passes. It always passes. Wind down 300 words. So here you are, listener. The snow has melted, the smoke has cleared, and the wind has grown quiet. You've walked the long road through ice-crusted mornings, through creaking beams and frozen fingers, through dark days and darker nights. But now the cold fades behind you. Let it go. Let your breath slow. Let your shoulders soften. Let your hands unfurl from fists into rest. There's a comfort in knowing you've survived something harsh and wide and endless, that you've stood through it step by aching step and come out into warmth. The fire, now low, still flickers, not out of fear, but as a gentle reminder of everything you endured, of the quiet strength it took just to keep moving. You hear birds again, faint, far away. The sky outside has turned pale with early light, that soft blush of blue that says almost morning. But it's not time to rise, not yet. Not for a while, so let the blankets wrap you like a hillside. Let the softness carry you like spring water. Let the memory of snow fade into mist. You are safe. You are warm. You are here, and the world, it can wait. For now, just drift. Sleep easy. End of script. Sweet dreams.